The message was a miracle, a crackle of hope in the cosmic silence. For decades, the galactic consensus had listened to the faint, desperate pleas from the edge of the Orion Arm, a civilization called the Veln crying out as a celestial predator devoured their star. The consensus sent aid, of course, the finest engineers, the most compassionate diplomats. They failed. The Veln were dying, and the galaxy mourned another inevitable tragedy. No one told the Veln that their signal, amplified by a relay, had shot far beyond consensus space. No one could have predicted where it would land. On a young, turbulent world, racked by storms and tectonic fury, a species that had just learned to listen to the stars heard their cry. They heard, and they decided to answer. The Veln prayed for saviors. They didn't count on humans. The air on the Veln homeworld, Lyra 3, was thick with the scent of damp moss and slow decay. Ambassador Klar, his feathered crest drooping, watched the last consensus salvage ship shrink into the bruised purple sky. Its departure was silent, a final, graceful admission of defeat. The Dyson fragment, as they called the alien megastructure, slowly cannibalizing their sun, hung in the daytime heavens like a black, jagged scar, leaching the warmth and light from the world. The consensus is clear, the xenophysicist had said, its translated voice devoid of inflection. The fragment quantum anchor is intertwined with your star's core. Any attempt to dislodge, it will trigger a premature stellar collapse. Your evacuation has our full support for the next 3 generations. 3 generations to watch our world die, Klar thought. He looked at the great spire cities, their organic crystalline structures already growing dim, their photosynthetic skins fading. In the planetary listening post, a young technician, her plumage dull with exhaustion, stared at her array. A new signal had been filtering in for hours, not from the consensus, but from beyond. It was a brute force digital shout, overriding standard protocols. She decoded it with trembling hands. It was not a language. It was mathematics, physics, and superimposed over it a crude but unmistakable series of pictograms: a star, a foreign ship, an arrow pointing to Lyra 3, and a simple circle divided in half, one side dark, one side light. Ambassador, her voice chirped over the comm. Something is coming. Something new. Elsewhere, in the void between stars, the UNRS Oblivion's edge cut through the darkness. It was not a graceful ship. It was a blocky titan of reinforced titanium and heat-shielded ceramics, built not for diplomacy, but for survival. Inside, the atmosphere was a blend of recycled air, coffee, and focused tension. Captain Eris Thorne studied the Veln distress signal, now years old, but its despair chillingly fresh. A star-eating structure, she muttered to her chief engineer, Mikhail Chun. The Galactics call it impossible. Chun snorted, wiping grease from his hands onto his jumpsuit. They call us impossible, Cap Deathworlders. Their manuals say our ship shouldn't fly, that our energy signatures are violently inefficient. He grinned. They've never had to brute force a solution through an asteroid field or outrun a solar flare in a tin can. The crew of the Oblivion's Edge were humanity's best and brightest, but also its most stubborn and adaptive. They were here because the galactic consensus, upon detecting their approach, had sent a terse, polite missive. The situation is unsalvageable. Your assistance is not required. Please avoid causing interstellar incident. Thorne had framed it on the bridge. We heard a cry for help, she told her crew. We're not turning back because the neighborhood thinks we're too ugly to help. Their first glimpse of the Lyra system was sobering. The consensus had been right about the scale. The Dyson fragment was a monstrous, incomplete shell of some unimaginable technology, a network of black rods and panels slowly spinning, siphoning the star's plasma in great, angry rivulets. Consensus ships, sleek and shimmering, orbited at a safe, mournful distance, watching the funeral. A sleek consensus diplomatic vessel, the elegance of reason, intercepted them as soon as they dropped out of warp. The holographic visage of its captain, a willowy being with large, liquid eyes, appeared on the bridge. Human vessel. The alien's voice was a soft melody. I am Ilias of the consensus. You must understand, this is a protected mourning zone. Your distinctive energy signatures may destabilize the fragment further. We must insist you depart. Thorn leaned forward. We're here to answer the Velen distress call. We have engineers. We have ideas. Ideas. Ilias blinked slowly, a sign of profound confusion. There are no ideas. The physics is absolute. Your presence is a disturbance. Your ship registers radiation levels and structural stress tolerances that are alarming. You will frighten the Velen. Before Thorn could retort, a new, raw signal came through, direct from Lyra 3. It was Ambassador Klar, his feathers puffed in a mix of defiance and despair. Human vessel. The consensus has given up. We have not. If you are truly here to help, come. We will grant you landing coordinates. What is the worst that can happen? Our world is already dying. Ilias's image flickered with distress. Ambassador, this is most unwise. They are Deathworlders. Their very biology is one of constant threat response. They solve problems with force. Thorn cut the link to the elegance and opened one to Klar. Ambassador, we're coming down. And for the record, she allowed a hard smile. Force is just focused physics. We're very good at physics. The descent was turbulent, the Oblivion's edge shuddering through the atmosphere like a falling anvil compared to the graceful glide of consensus shuttles. They landed in a designated field near the primary Spire city, their engines scorching the resilient moss into glass. When the ramp lowered, the humans stepped out in sealed environment suits, a precaution against microbes, not the gentle atmosphere. The Velen gathered were a sight of delicate beauty and profound sorrow. Klar approached, flanked by wary guards. He expected monsters, beings of crude fury. He saw instead the humans' faces through their visors' eyes, scanning the environment with intense curiosity, expressions set not in anger, but in a kind of grim assessment. Thorn removed her helmet, taking in a breath. The air was sweet, thin, peaceful. Too peaceful, she thought. Her crew followed suit. I am Captain Thorn. This is my team. She gestured to Chun, to Dr. Lena Petrova, their xenobiologist, and to Major Anya Sharma, head of security. Klar bowed. You come to a graveyard with hope. We have little left to offer but gratitude. As they were led towards the crystalline city, a low hum filled the air. From above, the elegance of reason descended silently, landing a distance away. Ilias and a contingent of other consensus species emerged, their bodies protected by shimmering energy fields. They watched the humans with a mixture of scientific curiosity and deep-seated dread. The cultural chasm was immediate. The Velen offered a broth, sipped delicately. Chun pulled out a concentrated nutrient bar and bit into it with a crack that made several Velen jump. When a small, harmless flutter beast landed on Major Sharma's arm, her instinctive, lightning-fast grab to inspect it before gently releasing it was misinterpreted as an attack. The Velen guards flinched, and the consensus observers let out a chorus of distressed chitters. You see, Ilias said softly to Klar, their reflexes are tuned for predation and sudden violence. Their world made them this way. Dr. Petrova tried to explain. Our world is geologically active. Weather is severe. Our ecosystem is competitive. We had to be observant, reactive, and resilient to survive. It doesn't mean we're violent, but the perception was set. The humans were forces of nature, unpredictable and dangerous. Yet, as Klar watched Captain Thorn ignore the diplomatic tensions and immediately start asking for detailed schematics of the fragment, for energy readings, for geological surveys of Lyra 3, he saw something else. He saw a focus that burned brighter than his fading sun. Where the consensus saw an immutable tragedy, the humans saw a problem, and they looked at it with the same expression a Velen might look at a tangled growth blocking their sun path, not with despair, but with the first stirrings of a plan. The consensus provided the data, with an air of presenting autopsy results. In the Veln's central arboretum, now lit by artificial sun lamps, holograms of the Dyson fragment spun. Ilias and his science team explained with polite finality. The anchor is a quantum-locked neutrino lattice, fused with the star's core dynamics. It is, for all intents and purposes, a part of the star now. Removing it is like removing a creature's skeleton without killing it. The star would collapse. Captain Thorne listened, her eyes narrowed. Mikhail Chun didn't listen at all. He was running simulations on a bulky human datapad, muttering about inverse resonant frequencies and controlled cavitation. "You're thinking of it as a surgery," Thorne finally said, interrupting Ilias. "What if we think of it as a siege?" The room fell silent. The Veln tilted their heads. The consensus scientist's skin flushed with confusion colors. "A siege?" Clar asked. "You don't attack the fortress directly if it's too strong," Major Sharma said, her voice matter of fact. "You cut its supply lines. You starve it." Dr. Petrova pointed to the energy flow models. "The fragment is siphoning plasma to power its growth and its quantum anchor. It's a parasite. What if we could reduce the energy intake, make the host star less nutritious?" Ilias waved a delicate limb. "And how would you propose to do that?" "Cool a star as a star." Chun looked up, his eyes alight. "Not cool it. Shield it. Partially. A stellar sunscreen." He threw his data to the main display. It was a chaotic, brutal plan. He proposed using the Oblivion's Edge's heavy fabricators, combined with Veln crystalline growth technology, to manufacture billions of reflective foil sheets, each the size of a city block. They would be deployed in a shifting constellation between the star and the fragment's main collection arrays. It would require constant adjustment, insane navigational algorithms to avoid the plasma streams. A consensus astrophysicist objected, its frills quivering. The radiation and heat would vaporize any known material within hours. "We brought our own material," Chin said. "A carbon ceramic weave developed for skimming the atmosphere of Jupiter. It's rated for 4,000 Kelvin and stupid levels of radiation. We use it for mining." The word mining hung in the air, a concept so crude to the galactics it was barely intellectual. They built. They nurtured. They did not mine stars. Clar felt a flutter, not of hope, but of terrifying possibility. "Would this sunscreen cause harm to our star, temporarily reduce output to your planet by about 2%, Petrova said. "A minor global cooling. But it would cut the fragment's energy intake by an estimated 40%. Maybe enough to weaken the quantum anchor's stability." "It is a theory built on violence," Ilias insisted. "Forcing a solution onto a celestial body. The risks of miscalculation are catastrophic. Staying the course is guaranteed catastrophic," Thorne countered. "We're not asking for permission, Ilias. We're asking the Veln if they want us to try." Clar looked at the fading light filtering through the arboretum's canopy. He thought of his daughter, her plumage losing its luster. He made the decision. Do it. What followed was a spectacle of what the consensus could only describe as controlled madness. The Oblivion's Edge moved to a high orbit, becoming a factory. Its fabricators, designed to build habitats from asteroid ice, now worked nonstop, churning out massive rolls of mirrored foil. Veln shuttles, piloted by the bravest of their kind, worked alongside human-piloted heavy lifters that handled the radiation and gravitational shear as if they were mere turbulence. The humans worked in shifts that seemed inhumanly long. They consumed potent stimulants, argued with raised voices that scared the Veln, and fixed mechanical problems with percussive maintenance. When a consensus observer delicately asked if they ever rested, a human engineer laughed. "Rest is for when the job's done, or you're dead." Major Sharma and her security team, meanwhile, discovered a different problem. The fragment was not entirely inert. As this sunscreen constellation began to take shape, casting vast, shifting shadows on the fragment, unknown defensive protocols activated. Small, autonomous drone units, like metallic insects, detached from the megastructure and began attacking the foil layers, slicing them with precise energy cutters. The consensus ships observed, refusing to engage. They are part of the fragment system. Engaging them might trigger a larger response. Sharma didn't hesitate. She launched in a modified fighter craft, a design built for combat in asteroid fields. What ensued was not a graceful dance of energy weapons. It was close-range, brutal, and physical. Sharma's craft, equipped with kinetic harpoons and reinforced leading edges, rammed the drones, lanced them, or simply herded them into collisions with each other. She fought with a terrifying, adaptive aggression that was broadcast on all channels. Ilias watched, horrified. They are brawling. In space. But Klar watched the energy readings. The fragment's power intake was dropping. For the first time in decades, the growth rate of the black scar in his sky had slowed. Then it stopped. A new signal emanated from the fragment. Not Velm, not consensus. A deep, resonant pulse of wrongness. The star itself seemed to shudder. The Dyson fragment was reacting, not as a machine, but as a wounded beast. The pulse was a physical wave, a distortion in local space-time that made sensors scream and minds ache. On Lyra 3, it manifested as a sudden, global headache for the Veln and a spike of nausea for the humans. In orbit, the elegant consensus ships recoiled, their systems flickering. The Oblivion's edge shuddered but held, its robust systems built for worse. It's a resonant frequency attack, Chen reported, his fingers flying over consoles, targeting the quantum bonds in our foil and in our own ship's alloys. It's trying to shake us apart. The beautiful, reflective sunscreen began to fracture. Foil sheets vibrated into glittering dust. The fragment's dark surface rippled, and new, massive plasma conduits unfolded, seeking to bypass the human obstruction. Ilias's image, now flickering with static, appeared on the bridge. You have provoked it. The fragment is not mere machinery. It is a semi-sentient harvesting engine. You have triggered its survival protocols. It will now prioritize eliminating the threat. So it's a fight, Thorne said, her voice cold. Fine. Major, can you herd it? Sharma, back from her dogfight, was reviewing the data. Kinetics work on the drones, but the main structure is too massive. We need a bigger hammer. It was then that the Veln scientist, the young technician who had first heard the human signal, spoke up in a council meeting. Her name was Shrell. The fragment is anchored by manipulating core dynamics. She chirped, her voice small but steady. Your sunscreen attacked its energy. What if we attack its stability, its sense of place? Dr. Petrova leaned in. Explain. Shrell brought up Lyra 3's geological scans. Our world is stable. But your world, you mentioned tectonic violence. You understand planetary stress. She highlighted the system's asteroid belt and the two gas giants further out. The fragment's anchor requires a precise gravitational constant. What if we changed it? A crazy, audacious idea took shape. Chun, working with Shrell and a horrified consensus astrophysicist, devised Project Thumper. The plan was to use the Oblivion's Edge's powerful warp drive engines, not for travel, but as localized gravity projectors. They would, in conjunction with precisely timed kinetic strikes from nudged asteroids, create a series of intense, artificial gravity waves. They would literally shake the space around the star, introducing a chaotic variable the fragment's perfect, stable anchor could not tolerate. It is insanity, Ilias pleaded. You could destabilize the star's fusion process. You could rip the planets from their orbits. The fragment is already destabilizing the star, Thorne shot back. We're adding controlled chaos to break a rigid system. It's judo. Use the enemy's strength against it. The Veln High Council was divided. Many saw this as a final, potentially world-ending gamble. Klar, his resolve hardened by the sight of the fragment fighting back, argued passionately. The consensus offered us a graceful death. The humans offer us a chance. However, wild, to die fighting for life. I choose the fight. Preparation was frenetic. Human and Velen pilots worked to redirect small asteroids using precisely placed thrusters. The Oblivion's edge positioned itself at a calculated Lagrange point, its engines glowing ominously. Consensus ships withdrew to a safe distance, their captains broadcasting formal protests, declaring humans rogue agents. The first thump was a deep, subsonic boom felt in the bones of every ship. The Oblivion's edge fired its warp drive in a focused, milliseconds-long burst, distorting gravity. A small asteroid, guided by Sharma and her fighter, slammed into a predetermined point in the fragment's lattice. Space itself seemed to flinch. The fragment pulsed again, a discordant, angry sound. It launched a swarm of drones, larger this time, towards the human ship. Sharma and her pilots met them, not with elegant formations, but with savage close-quarters tactics, using the asteroids as cover and weapons. Thump! Another distortion. A piece of the fragment, a smaller collector array, sheared off, tumbling into the star. The Velen on the surface watched their sky crackle with unnatural lightning. The fragment responded not with another pulse, but by projecting a concentrated beam of harvested starfire directly at the Oblivion's edge. Shields designed for radiation and micrometeorites buckled under the stellar fury. Alarms blared. A fire broke out in engineering. Hull breach on deck 7. Chin yelled, sealing his suit. "We're cooking in here." "One more thump," Thorn ordered, clutching her console as the ship trembled. "All power to the engines." Now, the Oblivion's edge, venting atmosphere and trailing debris, gathered every joule of power. With a sound that tore at reality, it delivered the final, massive gravity distortion. At the same moment, Srel from a Velen science vessel used their crystalline technology to fire a resonant frequency burst into the fragment's anchor point, a frequency based on the human's own hull vibrations, a song of stubborn, Deathworld resilience. For a terrible moment, nothing happened. Then, the great black scar in the sky began to writhe. The quantum anchor, subjected to a gravity environment it was never designed for, and a resonance that matched its newfound predator, faltered, with a silent, terrifying release of energy visible across the electromagnetic spectrum. The connection to the star's core severed. The Dyson fragment didn't explode. It went dark, and then, obeying the laws of orbital mechanics it had once defied, it began to drift, a dead husk slowly pulled into an unstable, decaying orbit around the star. On the bridge of the Oblivion's edge, smoke-filled and damaged, there was no cheer. Only a stunned silence, broken by the Velen dispatcher's voice, choked with emotion. The energy readings from our star, they're stabilizing. The drain has stopped. They had won. But the Oblivion's edge was mortally wounded, and the galaxy was watching. Victory was a silent, drifting thing. The great fragment, now inert, cast a cold shadow as it began its long, final fall into the star. On Lyra 3, the pale sunlight seemed, for the first time in a generation, to hold a promise of warmth. The psychic weight of inevitable doom lifted, replaced by a dazed, fragile hope. In orbit, the reality was more grim. The UNRS Oblivion's edge was a wreck. The stellar lance had carved a deep, molten canyon across its port side. Multiple decks were open to vacuum, power was failing, and life support was on emergency batteries. The crew, bruised and burned but alive, moved through the smoky gloom, fighting to stabilize their dying home. Captain Thorne's voice was raspy over the intercom. "Abandoned ship protocol is not yet authorized. We have wounded, and we have a job to finish. Chun, what's our tether to life from main engineering?" Now a char cavern, Mikhail Chun coughed. "Warp core is offline and fried. Primary reactors are dead. We're on batteries and prayers cap. Maybe 48 hours of minimal life support. Hull integrity is at 32%. She won't take another tug, let alone a warp jump." The sleek form of the consensus vessel elegance of reason appeared on the scanners, followed by several others. They held position, not approaching. A hailing frequency opened. Human vessel. Ilias's voice came, its usual melodic tone replaced by something strained, almost awed. Your actions have resulted in an unanticipated outcome. The fragment is neutralized. The Veln star is recovering. This is unprecedented. We're glad you approve, Thorne said, wiping soot from her brow. We could use a tow. There was a long pause. That is problematic. Your vessel's radiation and particle leakage is contaminating the local space. Your technology, your methods, they violate multiple consensus protocols on celestial intervention and controlled escalation. A formal inquiry has been initiated. We are not permitted to render direct aid until the adjudicators arrive. A cold anger settled on the bridge. Major Sharma, her arm in a makeshift sling, snarled, "They're going to let us die floating here after we just saved a planet." Dr. Petrova looked at the biological scans. They're scared, Anya. Not of us dying, of what we represent. We broke their immutable physics. We used chaos as a tool. To them, that's as dangerous as the fragment. On the planet, the news was met with outrage. Ambassador Klar, standing before the Veln High Council, his feathers bristling with a fury his peaceful people had never known, broadcast a message to the consensus and to all local ships. These beings came from the dark, answering a cry you had given up on. They fought a monster you called unstoppable. They are wounded, adrift, and you speak of protocols if the consensus will not help them, the Veln will. With our last ship and our bare hands if we must. A flotilla of Veln vessels, never designed for heavy lifting or rescue operations, rose from the planet. They were science shuttles, personal cruisers, and age cargo runners. They formed a pathetic, brave convoy aimed at the wounded human Leviathan. Ilias watched, his conscience a storm. He had followed the consensus doctrines his entire life. They were about harmony, non-interference, and accepting the natural order. Humans were a violent, unnatural order. Yet, they had saved a civilization his people were prepared to merely console into extinction. The contradiction was tearing him apart. On the oblivion's edge, the humans were not waiting. "We're not dying today," Thorne declared. "Chun, what can we cannibalize the human instinct for survival, for making something from nothing, kicked into overdrive?" They began tearing apart non-essential systems. Weapon capacitors were jury-rigged into temporary power buffers. Hydroponic gel from the lab was used to seal minor hull breaches. They used the ship's fabricator, running on dying batteries, to create a crude solar sail from the remains of the stellar sunscreen foil, capturing the star's light for trickle power. When the first Veln shuttle docked, its airlock connecting with a shutter to the human ship's emergency hatch, they found not a crew in despair, but a crew in furious, cooperative motion. Veln engineers, used to elegant crystalline circuits, were handed plasma cutters and told to cut specific panels. They were shocked by the conditions inside, the smoke, the exposed wiring, the sheer visceral damage. But they were also awed by the calm, focused determination. A human would pause to help a Veln with a heavy piece of debris, their strength a shocking boon, before returning to their task. Klar himself came aboard, escorted by Major Sharma. He saw the human wounded in a makeshift med bay, where Dr. Petrova worked with a Veln medic, combining human trauma medicine with Veln neural soothing techniques. He saw a human engineer patiently showing a Veln technician how to reroute power through a fused conduit, using a vocabulary that was half math, half gesture. "You are all wounded," Klar said to Thorne. "We're still standing," she replied, giving a status report to a Veln pilot. "That's what matters. Thank you for coming." It was a brave thing to do. It was the only thing to do, Klar said, the concept of debt and honor crystallizing in his mind in a new, fierce way. The sight of the tiny Veln flotilla swarming the human ship, the blatant defiance of the consensus's non-interference order, forced Ilias's hand. He couldn't watch this new, fragile bond of two species be strangled by bureaucracy while brave beings died. He ordered the elegance of reason to move. Human vessel, Veln vessels, this is Ilias. We are moving to assist. We will provide a gravity tow and emergency power transfer. Please do not interpret this as consensus approval. Interpret it as an individual's debt. With the combined efforts of the Veln shuttles and the powerful consensus tug, the Oblivion's edge was stabilized. Its slow drift towards the star was arrested. Power was restored. The immediate crisis was over. But as the damaged human ship was gently towed toward the stable orbit around Lyra 3, a new, larger consensus vessel arrived. The Adjudicator. Its lines were severe, its purpose clear. The humans were to be quarantined, their technology examined, their actions judged. The battle for survival was over. The battle for their future and humanity's place in the galaxy was about to begin. The consensus adjudicator ship, keeper of laws, was a fortress of procedure. Its commander, an imposing being of rigid carapace and cold logic named Juris V, summoned representatives to its neutral docking spire. The air was chill, the light sterile. Captain Thorne, her uniform patched and stained, stood beside Ambassador Clar. Opposite them sat Juris V and a tribunal of various species, with Ilias looking uncomfortable to one side. The charges are thus, Juris V intoned, its voice like grinding stone. Unauthorized intervention in a consensus-monitored tragedy. Use of prescribed brute force, celestial manipulation. Contamination of a stellar environment with volatile technologies. Reckless endangerment of a client species. And, finally, the introduction of Deathworlder conflict paradigms into a stable region, setting a dangerous precedent. Thorne listened, her face a mask. Galaris crest flared. Without their reckless actions, my species would be planning its funeral. They succeeded where you failed. Success through violation is not success, Juris V countered. It is a deeper failure of principle. You may have saved your star, Ambassador, but at what cost you have allowed a species whose first response to a puzzle is to strike it to operate within your space. The long-term cultural damage is incalculable. The proceedings were broadcast. On Lyra 3 and on the patched-together Oblivion's edge, humans and Veln watched with growing anger. The Galactics were trying to reframe their salvation as a crime. Thorne was given a chance to speak. She didn't talk about physics or tactics. She spoke of the signal. We heard a call for help. In our culture, that is a sacred trust. You saw an immutable law of nature. We saw a neighbor's house on fire. You wrote a thesis on the inevitability of combustion. We kicked in the door. The result is a living world, a saved civilization. Judge that result. Juris V was unmoved. Your cultural imperatives are not galactic law. The adjudication is this: the human vessel is to be impounded. Its crew will be repatriated to their homeworld via consensus vessel, and a permanent quarantine beacon will be placed in your system, warning all of the danger of human problem-solving. The Veln will undergo a period of readjustment counseling to mitigate the psychological impact of your methods. It was a decree of exile and humiliation, a declaration that humanity was a disease to be contained. But the galaxy was watching now. The story of the Deathworlders who saved the Veln had spread via subspace chatter, far beyond the consensus's control. Other species, facing impossible calamities, had heard. Worlds chafing under the consensus's passive, tragic fatalism had heard. And the Veln had changed. Clar stood. He did not speak to the tribunal. He turned to the broadcast feed. People of the consensus, people of the galaxy, you have heard the judgment. They wish to send our saviors away in chains of bureaucracy. They wish to counsel us to forget the courage we witnessed. They call it contamination. We call it awakening. He gestured to Thorne. They're not monsters. They are beings of incredible resilience, compassion, and action. They taught us that some walls are not meant to be studied, but scaled. Some fires are not meant to be observed, but fought. We will not accept this judgment. Then he did something unprecedented. He turned to Juris V, the Veln people, as a sovereign civilization, formally withdraw from the Consensus Galactic Protectorate Program, effective immediately. We renounce your protection, as it always seemed to mean preparing us for death. And we extend a formal offer of permanent alliance, mutual defense, and shared knowledge to the United Nations of Earth. The chamber erupted in a chorus of shocked chitters and hums. A client species had never voluntarily left. It was unthinkable. Juris Veis Karapatse Darkend. You are emotionally compromised. You do not know what you are doing. We know exactly what we are doing, Clar said, his voice steady. We are choosing life with all its risks, over a safe, managed decline. On the Oblivion's edge, the crew cheered, a raw, human sound that echoed in the damaged hull. Ilias finally stood. His voice was quiet but carried. Juris Ve. I witnessed it all. Their violence is not mindless. It is focused. Their chaos is not random. It is a tool they wield with shocking precision. They are not a danger to order. They are a challenge to stagnation. I formally petition the tribunal to reconsider, not for their sake, but for ours, lest we become so enamored with the funeral rite that we forget the value of the life it mourns. The tribunal was in disarray. The legal foundations of their universe were cracking. In the midst of the chaos, a new priority alert came in. Not from Lyra, but from the edge of consensus space. A repeat of history. A mining colony on a rogue planetoid was reporting a catastrophic core collapse. Their signals were desperate. The consensus had already categorized it as a Tier 3 inevitability. The signal was put on screen. The pleading faces of another species filled the view. Juris V looked from them, to the defiant humans, to the resigned faces of his own tribunal. The weight of countless past tragedies, all accepted, all mourned, pressed down. Thorn saw the opportunity. She spoke into the sudden quiet. You have another unsalvageable situation. You know our methods. You fear them. So give us a leash. Send us there with observers. Juris V, you come yourself. Watch us. If we fail, or if we cause harm, then impound us. Exile us. But if we succeed, you rewrite your manuals. It was a gamble with their future. Juris V, cornered by protocol and the unignorable plea of the new distress signal, saw a way to definitively prove the human threat, or to witness something impossible again. The human vessel is in no condition to travel, he stated. Chen's voice, patched through from engineering, crackled over the open comm. Give us the parts and a week. We'll get her space-worthy. We're good at fixing broken things. A tense, galaxy-altering agreement was struck. The Oblivion's edge would be repaired with consensus and Velnaid. Then, with Juris V and Ilias aboard as observers, it would respond to the new distress call. Their actions would be humanity's trial. As the meeting adjourned, Clar walked with Thorn back to their docking port. The Veln's sun, now shining unimpeded, felt warm on his feathers. You turned your world into a wager, he said. Thorn looked at the bustling activity around her ship, Veln, and human engineers already working side by side, pulling apart consensus-provided components with a fearless curiosity that still made the Galactics nervous. No, she said, a tired but genuine smile on her face. We just opened a door. You're the ones who decided to walk through it. The galaxy thought it was saving you from us. Turns out, she looked at the vibrant, hopeful activity, at the diminishing shadow of the fragment in the sky. They might have needed saving from their own despair. The Oblivion's edge, a symbol of brutal practicality and unyielding hope, would fly again. Not as a rogue element, but as a herald. The Deathworlders had answered a call, and, in doing so, had issued a new one to the universe, a challenge to stop simply listening to the dark and to dare to answer back.